and your career and or your business, but it's going to be mostly focused on you as an individual. So think marketing, this concept of positioning, and how to position yourself to have a legendary career. So that's what we're going to talk about now. And if you're not in the right room, feel free to get out and find the right room. I know I'm in the right room. Okay, so at a high level, think 25 years from now, and think about a discussion or a conversation you're having with a group of people that you love in your life about what's transpired in your career over the last 25 years. So that's the context for the discussion that I'd like to have together about positioning. Because what we know is that everybody who is successful shares one thing in common. Before they were successful, they were positioned. They were in the right position to be successful. And by way of background, I've spent the vast majority of my career in marketing. I was the chief marketing officer of 3 publicly traded technology companies, and I'm an entrepreneur. I started my first business when I was 18. And at 38 years old, I retired from starting companies and running marketing for companies. And I transitioned to what I do now, which is I'm a coach. I have 2 partners, Al Ramadan and Dave Peterson, guys I absolutely love. We're in life together. Their kids call me Uncle Chris. And we coach entrepreneurs, CEOs, executive teams, and venture capitalists in Silicon Valley about how to build legendary businesses. And the core of what we work on is this concept called positioning. So what I'm going to share with you now is how to take the concepts of positioning and apply them to your career so that 25 years from now, you're having the conversation you want to be having as opposed to the conversation you don't want to be having. Okay? All right, so now let's talk about positioning. Anybody know who that is and what that is? It's Henry Ford, and what's the thing standing next to him? Did anybody know what he called it? A horseless carriage. That's positioning. So when Henry Ford says he invented the horseless carriage, why do you think he called it the horseless carriage? Correct. He was using language that was predicated on the current paradigm to introduce the new paradigm. If he had said, ta-da! The automobile! Everybody want to, I don't know what an automobile is. They wouldn't have been interested. Right? Because you and I as human beings, when we hear something we don't know, we assume it's stupid and we don't pay attention. That's what we do. So he didn't start off with the automobile or the car or the truck or the Ford F1 55 31 27 or my favorite, the Ford Shelby Cobra Mustang. He started off with the horseless carriage. That's positioning. He positioned his invention in a very defined way such that people would get it, and that's what created what in marketing we call a whole new category. There was a horse and buggy, and that was one category of transportation. He invented the automobile, a new category. And so every product or service to be successful needs to be positioned in a category. And a category is the way people bucketize any product or service. So what's that thing you have in your hand there? What do you call that? That'd be a phone, and it's a particular kind of phone, yes? What kind of phone is it? It's an iPhone, and an iPhone is in the smartphone category. And Apple positioned the iPhone from the beginning to be number one in this new category of phone or computing device, depending on your perspective, called a smartphone. So Apple positioned a new category called smartphone, and they used their marketing and their technology to achieve the number one position in that category. And that's exactly what Henry Ford did. A person that lives on the street, today what do we call them? A homeless person. That's what they're called, yes? When I was a kid, they were winos and bums. That's what they were called. Winos and bums. So, why do you think they're now called homeless people and not winos and bums? Politically correct, yeah. Said a different way, they got repositioned. Why did we reposition them? Because you and I are going to treat a homeless person differently than we're going to treat a bum. Language matters. Language is positioning. What did this person, a person in a wheelchair, what did we used to call this person in the 1800s, early 1900s, and probably up to about 1980? A cripple, right? If you called somebody a cripple today in a group of people, let's say a person in a wheelchair wheeled on into the room, and you said, "Oh, who's your friend the cripple?" Probably wouldn't go so well, right? But nobody thought about that in 1920. What do we call a person in a wheelchair today? Disabled or physically challenged. Again, they've been repositioned. Why? We treat somebody who's physically challenged or disabled differently than we would probably treat a cripple. Anybody heard of either of these two laws? Now, I don't want to have a political discussion with you, but there are people who would tell you that the Clean Air Act did more to destroy the environment in this country than any other piece of legislation. And there are people who would tell you that the Patriot Act did more to destroy our civil liberties than any other piece of legislation. Regardless of whether you believe that to be the case or not, if you were in Congress, it's hard to be against something called the Patriot Act, isn't it? Well, you're a patriot, aren't you? Right? If we'd call that the NSA is going to listen to everything you do act, may be different, right? And so those pieces of legislation were positioned from the beginning. Years ago, I had a conversation with a guy named Scott Bedbury. He was the chief marketing officer of two companies in his career, Nike and Starbucks. Scott did okay. And at the beginning of Starbucks, he joined when there were about 100 locations. They were having a conversation about what to call the product. Now, if you remember the world pre-Starbucks, if you're old enough to remember pre-Starbucks, coffee used to be free when you went to someone's office or house, or like a quarter at best, maybe 15 cents, 10 cents at the gas station or the Dunkin' Donuts. Or at home, we have Dunkin' Donuts, but in Canada, we also have Tim Hortons, and sometimes we put them together and we just call them Dunkin' Hornets. But regardless, it was inexpensive, and that's what you did, and that was that. And it all tasted basically about the same. It was muddy, crappy, warm water, right? They realized, oh, you paid 10, 15, maybe a quarter. They wanted to have what's called an ASP, an average selling price of $3. So can you get people in a market to pay $3 for a thing they currently pay 15 cents for? No. So what do you do if you want them to pay $3? You reposition it. It's not a coffee, right, Celeste? What's your favorite drink at Starbucks, love? Oh, you can't? Okay, well, what's your favorite drink at Pete's? A mocha. And is it like a grande or a medium's good? So they invent this new language, the triple grande latte. And instead of paying 10 cents, we will wait 15 minutes and pay now $5, right? Because they reposition coffee with an introduction of new language. Language matters. Doesn't the sea panda sound so nice? Right? We would relate to this creature differently if it was called a sea panda. It could be called, come on, we could have called it a sea panda. It has exactly the same, come on, it's a freaking panda in the water, a little different shape, but it changes the way you think about the animal, right? I don't know how well you could see this. This is from Hangover 47. I don't know how many of them they've made now. But this is the one where the dude wakes up with Mike Tyson's tattoo on his face. And so we have an expression at Play Bigger. We say, position yourself or be positioned. So what that means is that you and I, whether we like it or not, occupy a space in the minds or the brains of the people that matter in our careers. So if you're a realtor, there's a set of folks in your area who are going to put you in a slot in their head. And your coworkers do that, and your boss does that. That's called positioning. And if we don't position ourselves, we'll get positioned. And so we think of positioning, it's like a tattoo. And I have a lot of tattoos. I've picked every one of them. If you don't position yourself, you could end up with Mike Tyson's tattoo on your face. That is to say, you may or may not like what people call you, how they describe you, the story they would tell others about you when you're not present. That's how you're positioned. And if you didn't do it yourself, they will do it for you. And you may like it, or you may not like it. But people in business who want to have legendary careers, the reason they take positioning themselves so importantly is because they want to decide how they're known. They don't want somebody putting Mike Tyson's tattoo on their face. So human beings compare and rank everything. Somebody tell me what business you're in. Real estate. How many realtors, where do you do real estate? And are you a realtor? Yeah. How many realtors roughly would there be in North Jersey? There's at least 3,000 realtors in North Jersey. And does the 80-20 rule apply? 20% of the realtors do 80% of the business? Is it skewing even more? Is it skewing to 90-10? Probably. Yeah. So there's a set of realtors who are incredibly successful. And then there's a lot of others, right? I don't know those realtors that are incredibly successful in North Jersey, but I know one thing about them. They are well positioned in their market. They didn't leave it up to chance. And when people make a realtor decision, they are not deciding, what's your first name, ma'am? Paula. They're not deciding, do I like Paula as a realtor? That's not the decision. What they are doing is they're going, Paula and a bunch of other realtors. And in their mind, some people get super analytical. They build a spreadsheet about it. Others are less analytical. But however they do it, in their mind, people are adding up features and benefits of Paula versus the 3 to 5 other realtors that most people will talk to if they don't have a pre-existing relationship with a realtor. And they may talk to their spouse or their friend or whatever, and they'll say, well, you know, what I liked about Paula, blah, blah, what I didn't like about Paula, blah, 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 and what I liked about Fred, Wilma, Betty, and Barney, etc., right? And then they make a decision based on a perception that they have about Paula versus everyone else. Positioning is taking control of the creation of that perception, given that we know that human beings rate and rank everything. It's just what we do. If I say Whole Foods and Safeway, what comes to your mind just immediately? Grocery store? Natural? Holistic kind of food? And what bucket would you have Safeway in? Right. So forget reality. That's not the conversation we're having, right? The perception most people have had, if you've walked into either one of these places or both, is one, organic and healthy and all that. And expensive, right? Whole paycheck is the, right? So expensive, organic, etc. And the other is mass produced, right? And that's the experience that you have. We'll go back to this example a little bit later, so remember that. But it's interesting to note that all I have to do is put up the slide, and the positions of the, first of all, you know what category they're in. You know they're grocery stores. And their position in the category called grocery store, you think you know, right? Well, guess what? There are departments at either one of these companies that have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in them who spend millions and millions of dollars a year for you to think what you just thought when the logos and the pictures came up. It's by design. It's not an accident. Anybody have an opinion about these two products? One will hold things forever, and one is just for paper. Yep. Which one's which? The Gorilla Glue will hold it forever, and the Elmer's is the crapola you use in kindergarten for, what are those little construction paper projects? Right? Do we still do that? Maybe. No, we're too busy on video games now for that shit. That's what we did when we were kids. Now, interestingly enough, go read the back of this. It's so awesome. It's some of the best marketing in history. It says, hey, you might want to think about putting this down. Because if you buy this and put it on anything, it's going to be stuck to whatever it's on forever. Don't, under any circumstances, put this shit on your hand or on your gear. Because it's going to stick forever. It's hysterical marketing. The interesting thing is, these guys have killed these guys. And these guys used to be number one. Because they repositioned the whole space, and they positioned themselves as the leader. You've been to an Apple store? Do you know that the Apple store is so busy you have to make an appointment to buy shit from them? You know that? I don't know if you heard that old, oh, for the love of God, Lockhead. Yogi Berra. That restaurant's so busy no one goes there anymore. It's kind of like that. Now, have you ever been to a Microsoft store? Here's the interesting thing. It looks exactly like an Apple store with one difference. There's no one there. That's positioning. Apple creates excitement around their products so much so that people line up to buy them. Right? Microsoft doesn't do that because they don't own the magical position that Apple owns. And Steve Jobs was arguably the greatest marketing executive of all time. Okay, so what does all this mean to you? Well, the first aha is you're a brand. You and Apple are the same thing in the business world. I would even argue in your personal life, because your friends and family, if they describe you to someone with 2 to 3 sentences, which is what most people do when they describe somebody, they say something about you. And so do your colleagues, and so do your prospects, and so do your existing customers, and in business, so do your competitors. So just like Apple, just like Microsoft, just like Gorilla Glue, you're a brand, whether you like it or not. You're known for something. And that brand gets positioned. And here's what we know. There's no such thing as a legendary brand in a shitty position. And from a marketing point of view, what's the position in the category that you're in that you want to have? Yes, number one. Because when somebody's looking for a small business accountant in Tucson, what's the question they're most likely to ask if they're asking for a referral from somebody they know? Who's the best small business accountant in Tucson? Who's the best residential realtor is it North Jersey? In North Jersey. That's what they're going to ask. Because that's what we're trained to ask. So what's my point? The objective of positioning is to position the brand as number one in its category. The world that I live in the technology business, me and my partners are launching a research report on Tuesday of this coming week. We analyzed over 500,000 technology companies that have been founded and funded since 2000 to understand what happens to their what's called market cap, which is the value of the company, how much the company's worth. Okay, I don't know if you remember a little while ago, Apple became the most valuable company in the world. They're worth $300 billion. They passed Exxon, and Exxon is a government-protected monopoly. Hard to do as a non-government protected monopoly, right? But a market cap is the value of the company. And what we're going to announce next week is in the technology business, the number one player in the category is worth 70 to 80% of the entire market cap of the category. That is to say, in the technology business, it's winner take all. And the winner gets almost all the economic value, and the number two gets some scraps, and everyone else is a piece of crapola, literally. The venture capitalists in Silicon Valley over the last 10 years have underperformed the S&P 500, and the reason is really simple. If you invest in the market leader, what we call the category king, like Facebook, the biggest category king of the last 15 years, you make a ton of money. And if you invest in Tribe or MySpace, you lose a ton of money. It's binary in the technology business. Now, I'm not an expert in the real estate business, but here's what we know, and you see it in the 1% discussion. Our culture is moving more and more to a winner-take-all culture. That is, the best get the vast majority of the economics, and everyone else doesn't. Now, you could say that's fair or unfair, and you can want to go to Washington and try to change the system, and you can do all that, and if you can, God bless you. In business, what you got to realize is the way the game's architected and figure out how to win the game. And winning the game is, the objective is to position my brand as number one in my category. Because more and more, number one gets all the economics. In something like real estate, it's probably moving to 10% of the realtors are taking 90% of the economics. And that we see that getting more dramatic over and over again. So that's the objective for you in your career as a realtor, as an accountant, as a lawyer, as a software developer, whatever you are, as a bike rental shop, whatever you are. All right, so if you're gonna be what we call the category king, if that's what you're gonna be, you gotta start with the intention to be that. See, Madison Bumgarner doesn't walk into the game going, well, I'm gonna go in the game and see what happens. That's not his mental state. His mental state is, I'm going to go in, I'm going to strike out the side every time. And we're going to win this game, right? It's not an accident. Madison Bumgarner was not sitting in his parents' basement drinking beer, picking his butt, and he just happened to be the greatest pitcher in the history of the World Series. That's not what happened. Something else happened. What happens is you got to act the part, look the part, surround yourself with other people who are also great brands. Rock did a lot of work with Tony Robbins for years. My favorite Tony Robbins quote of all time is, we become who we hang out with. We become who we hang out with. Legendary brands are associated with other legendary brands. My partners Dave and Al and I, we decided we wanted to write a book. We quickly realized we have no experience writing books. So with this context, we said we want to write a New York Times business bestseller. You're either number one in the category, you either suck, don't suck, or you're legendary, right? Well, we're not going to write a book that doesn't suck, right? So we said, okay, well, how do you do that if you've never written a book? Well, we decided the answer to that question was, we can spend a lot of time training ourselves to write a book. We don't have time to do that. We need to get on it. So we hired a guy who's one of the top 5 writers in the technology industry. His name's Kevin Maney, to partner with us on the book. Well, Kevin got us one of the top 3 book agents in New York, a guy named Jim Levine. And Jim Levine just closed a publishing deal for us with a very large advance from Harper Business, one of the top 3 business book publishers in America. Now, why did that happen? It happened for one reason. We positioned ourselves as experts in our field, and this last bit, real important, no Kevin, no Jim. No Jim, no Harper Business. We're like self-published. Oh, we're going to do a new model. We're going to self-publish because we're going to market it ourselves on Twitter and see what happens. Yeah, okay, knock yourself out. Or you could go to Harper Business and partner with the head of business publishing there who knows how to produce, quote, classics, is what she calls them, right? So, legendary brands position themselves, and the objective is to be number one. And when they do things with other brands, even if I'm a realtor, if I'm partnering with other realtors, if I'm partnering with other loan origination companies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they are number one brands. And you got to look the part. Fake it till you make it. I got thrown out of high school at 18 for being stupid and started a company. Well, what did I do? I grew a beard and I bought a suit. Because I had to look like a successful entrepreneur even though I couldn't find my ass with both hands. Right? Apple looks a certain way, yes? Whole Foods looks one way when you walk in, right? Safeway looks a whole other way, yes? It's not an accident. You got to look the part. You got to intend to be number one in your category from the beginning, and everything you do is representative of your brand. So, you have to position yourself where you will be positioned. If you don't make up the position that you want, if you're not clear and don't articulate it, others will make it up for you. So, what are the secrets to personal positioning? Number one, be legendary at what you do. It's really, really hard as a marketer to position a lousy product, right? It's way easier to position a legendary product. The head of marketing for this company, Crystal Geyser, has a tough job. You know why? In a blind taste test, 10 out of 10 people said it was water. There's no product differentiation. Oh, but their number one competitor is Evian. Their differentiation is it comes from France. You been to France? I don't know. Water doesn't taste any different to me there. I go surfing in Fiji. They have Fiji water in Fiji. It says Fiji water. That's the brand. Tastes a lot like Crystal Geyser to me. Right? So product differentiation matters. When there is none, it's a bummer. Right? And if there's like poop floating in the water, giant bummer. Right? So be legendary at what you do. Positioning a legendary product is a lot easier than positioning a lousy one. Be different. This is where most individuals in their careers and most companies get stuck. See, we think that the argument, the marketing argument, the positioning argument we want to have is better. I'm better than the 5,000 realtors in North Jersey. And let me tell you why. Most of the time, the market doesn't accept better. Or if they do, the differences are so small, markets are so competitive. If you told me the 3 top reasons you're better than the 5,000 other realtors, what would they be? Yep. Communication, team, and amazing marketing. And what percentage of the 5,000 realtors would say something like those 3 things? Okay. We'll get to testimonials to prove. If you're using testimonials to prove it, then you're positioning yourself on better, not different. See, when I'm saying I'm better, then I need a lot of proof. When I'm saying I'm different, I don't need customer testimonials as much. I need something else, and we're going to talk about what that something else is. So the market can't generally distinguish better. Like, for example, Lexus, Mercedes. Is one a better product? Does anybody really believe that like one's much better than the other? They're both high-quality automobiles, right? Hard to claim better. And so a big mistake is getting stuck in better. What the market will accept is different. So if I say to you, hey, what do you feel like for dinner tonight? Sushi or pizza? What happens in your mind? Do I want to be healthy or not healthy? What's the cost? Yeah. Now, if I say to you, hey, do you like thin crust or deep dish better? Depends on the mood. And so what's my point? Sushi, pizza, forces a choice in a way that thin crust and deep dish does not. Now, the reason most individuals, and therefore most companies, position is better and not different is, as human beings, we have a desire to fit in. If you're in a market like real estate, we've been trained that the real estate buyer looks for similar things. So we all say all the same crap because we think that's what the market is looking for. But when 5 people say all the same crap, it's really hard to make a decision. Thin crust, deep dish, pizza, sushi forces a decision. So if I was a realtor, by way of example, and I met a prospective client, the first thing I would say is, well, I want you to know I'm really different than most realtors in North Jersey. Now, if I said that to you, what would you likely think or say? How? Now, what comes out next, if it's just better, the prospect or customer's going to go, well, that's just the same crap I heard from everyone else. So you actually have to say something that's different. You can't just say you're different. But my point is, when you start off with, hey, I just want you to know, I might not be the right realtor for you. Right? And you go, well, what do you mean? Well, I have a very different perspective. We built a very different team around here. It's unusual in our industry. All of a sudden, the prospect is what? They're engaged, they're interested because you just said something, and I'm going to use this word very much on purpose, provocative. So, the root of getting to different is to know what problem you solve. Why? Because you and I as human beings believe that if you can articulate my problem, you must have the answer to it. So if I was in the real estate business, after I said, well, I'm really different, and they said, well, how are you different? You'd say, well, it turns out that in residential real estate in New Jersey, there's a problem that most people have that they don't realize they have. And we solve that problem. It turns out if you solve that problem, you can get a result that you can never get without solving that problem. Well, now we're listening. Yes? Yes. So the bigger and the more urgent the problem, the more people will spend to solve it. I was on a business trip about, God forbid, 15 years ago, and I was in Stockholm, Sweden. And I land, and there's 15 messages from my wife on the phone. So I call, and she's hysterical, because it turns out our house smells like a giant skunk ass. And she's figured out that there's probably a dead skunk under the deck. Anybody here had a dead skunk under the deck? It's like the worst thing that can happen to your house other than a flood or an earthquake or a psycho killer. I mean, it's really, the entire house, it's unbelievable, right? So anyway, I'm in Stockholm, Sweden. There's not a thing I can do about it. Long story short, I sort of say, hey, sweetheart, like, let's figure, and I help her, I coach her through finding 1-800-SKUNKS-OR-US or whatever the guy was. And this guy comes out to the house with the van, finds the dead skunk under the deck, takes the deck apart, puts the skunk in a bag, puts the bag in the back of the skunk mobile, and that's it, and then sprays the house, and Bob's your uncle. Now, guess what he charged for that? $200. Well, guess what I would have paid for that? 10 grand. Okay, because it was urgent and it needed to be fixed. And so when we go frame a problem, if I'm a realtor in North Jersey, I say, well, listen, there is an urgent problem that most people don't even realize exists when looking at real estate in North Jersey. And if you don't get solving that problem right, then the whole transaction isn't going to work out. So when we go to position ourselves, we want to think about what problem do we solve, and we want to think about articulating the problem in a way that positions the problem as urgent and a top priority and therefore worthy of investment. And that's what begins to create something we call differentiation. Now, here's the magic. Don't fall off the stage. Here's the magic. Have a point of view, or a POV for short. And a point of view is different than a marketing slogan. See, everybody has a marketing slogan, right? It's awesome. That's what the marketing slogan says, right? I was driving up here. Actually, Toyota's got a new campaign running up here this morning. I saw all these signs that Toyota, be happy. Okay, that's a slogan. They paid an ad agency $20 million to come up with that billboard on 80. Trust me, I know. And the slogan, be happy, Toyota, will do zero to move the needle on their sales. I bet my net worth on it. Why? It's not a point of view. It's not a story. Anybody here have young, like little girls in their life? Any of them like princess stuff? Yes. And all the Disney stuff? All that? So all that Disney stuff, a lot of it's been around forever, right? Why does every generation of kids glom onto that stuff? Do little boys wear Batman costumes on Halloween? Yeah, right? Batman been around a long time. Why do these things continue? Because they're legendary brands that are predicated on a story. Cinderella is a story that little girls relate to. Batman is a story that little boys relate to. And it continues, and the brand gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Yet in business, we have stuff like Toyota, be happy. Okay. So, in business, the story needs to be architected in a very particular way. So, it sets the strategic context for who you are in your career and why you're different. How it does that is it defines the problem and positions you as the person or the company that solves that problem with a powerful, compelling story. So, how do you build a point of view that works? First of all, you need something that's provocative. My partner Dave, when he was still an operating executive, when he was a chief marketing officer, when he was looking for his next gig, he had a personal point of view. He would sit down with the CEO who was interviewing him to work for her, and he would start the interview off by saying, hey, I just want you to know, I hate marketing people. I think they're useless. And the CEO would say to the CMO candidate, what are you talking about? And he'd say, well, and then he'd go on a discussion about all of the things that are wrong with marketing executives in the technology industry. I could give you the details if you cared. Dave Peterson, by the time he got his last CMO gig, was the most recruited chief marketing officer candidate for B2B companies in Silicon Valley, because he had a point of view that said, I hate marketing people, I think they're useless. So we want a provocative headline that explains or that positions you as different. Then you want to blow out the problem. So framing the problem very powerfully. He would tell the CEO why marketing executives are useless. And the whole time the CEO was going, yeah, we had an idiot here for 18 months who was exactly that. And then we fired that idiot. And then 18 months later, we had an idiot who did it. And the whole time the CEO is going, yeah, those are all the things I hate about marketing people too. And then almost the rest of it doesn't even matter at that point. Because what does the CEO in this situation do? Well, shit, if you understand all of my frustrations with chief marketing officers, you must be the chief marketing officer I've been looking for. So, building a POV to position yourself as number one in your category, 80% of the job is framing the problem. What's the biggest problem that potential homeowners and repeat homeowners in your geography have, and how do you frame that problem? And if you do that, and you wrap that in a provocative headline, and you have even a mediocre version of, but it doesn't have to be this way, buying a home could be awesome, and we've created the 7 steps to awesome home buying in North Jersey. You want to know what they are? So a point of view also has thought leadership built into it. A point of view sets an agenda in a market. Said in a different way, it changes the way the buyer thinks about the buying criteria. You follow me? It creates this thing called a from to. I used to think it was about this, and now I think it's about that. That's incredible positioning. And when you go to market yourself, either as an individual in your career, like Dave did, or as a small business, or as a company that wants to be the next Facebook or Oracle or Cisco, you market the POV, not the company. You don't market yourself. I love all the realtor stuff, you know, the pictures of me doing all the great stuff and yeah, number one in the region, top. That's all great. That just sounds like bragging. It's great. Doesn't explain to me what problem you solve and why you're different. And it doesn't do that with a story. Cinderella persists for a reason. Batman persists for a reason. People remember stories. They do not remember dumbass tagline, be happy. Toyota, be happy. Toyota, drink beer. Like, what are you talking about, right? Doesn't mean anything. So legendary POVs create a from to. They change the buyer's thinking about their buying criteria such that they're tilted towards you. And what you're doing by changing the agenda is you're tilting the market to your advantage. If you're an accountant, you want to talk about what makes you different as an accountant in the context of the problem that you solve for companies who are looking for accounting, such that they change their mind about what their decision criteria should be. And if the person that writes the decision criteria for the purchase decision is best positioned to get the business. And then you got to execute. You got to deliver. None of this stuff works if you're not legendary. None of this stuff works unless you deliver on solving the problem that you framed as different for the prospect. So the way to win, this is General Patton, attack with violence. A good plan violently executed today is better than a perfect plan next week. Thank you for your time and attention.